they tell you, like, see God in all things. God is everywhere. God is in every person and everything. God infuses reality. And while I was in Ecuador, it was dripping with the divine. There was so much. God was present everywhere. And whether it was walking down the street, saying hi to neighbors, whether it was interacting with mothers and fathers and their kids, Christ's face was there in those people. Christ's face was just, I was looking at it every day.
Nosotros somos ricos por la bendición de Dios. Somos ricos. La palabra pobre se la divulga, pero no hay pobre. Somos ricos por la bendición que Dios nos da.
Nosotros no tenemos agua. La luz así que es clandestina porque el dirigente aquí, él robó luz y ellos no vendían la luz a nosotros.
El agua la cogemos por medio de tanqueros, que a veces tenemos como problemas con el tanquero porque no sabemos el tanquero cómo esté por dentro, si está limpio.
El arbolito no había muchas casas, peor de ladrillos, ni bloques, ni nada. Eran casas de caña. Y esto aquí, por ejemplo, en mi solar era una poza. Entonces estaba así como abandonados, todo.
Hay necesidades de escuelas, de hospitales, de luz, que no hay acá dentro del Monte Sinaí.
The higher concentration of extreme poverty is located here in Mount Sinai. And because they do not belong to the local government of Guayaquil and do not belong to any other local government, they are the nobodies.
Me imagino que ellos aprenden de eso y ven la realidad. Y eso le enseña.
Sí, eso es lo que nos falta, como los servicios básicos para ser como completo, diría yo, porque de ahí todo está bien, la naturaleza, tienes una casita que no es un lujo, pero tenemos donde vivir.
And the only ones working since some years ago with these people to improve their conditions of life are Rostro de Cristo, as Hogar de Cristo, and a couple more of agencies or institutions. Yes, that's the reality here.
The program started when I was a missionary in 1988 and was assigned to Ecuador and the coast of Ecuador. Got me to thinking that if young people from universities came and walked with us a little bit, it would be quite a powerful and transformative experience.
My sophomore year at Fairfield, we took a program down, and I was able to go on that trip. And that trip planted the seed about seeing if it would be possible to do a more expansive time there. So there wasn't really a volunteer program yet. And reached out to Diego and said, I feel a call to go to Ecuador, and what's the possibility of living and working with you for a year?
Jim came over when he started his program, and he introduced us to two young men. They were the only two volunteers he had, and they came over here and they got to know the foundation, and so from the get-go we've been partners.
I was doing preschool, then I worked out with the English program at Nuevo Mundo, and I invited Ed and Tom. When they met the patients, who were many of them mutilated by this disease, they came to me that following Monday and they said, we understand now why you need to have someone to fill your position at Nuevo Mundo in your program. We'd like to do that because you need to be there full time.
So I think Diego's hope was what Ed and Tom, my classmate Tom Stopka, are doing seems to be working.
There's been a continual clarification of what we're about, what we're trying to do and what we're trying not to do, what we're seeking to be and how we're seeking to express and live our experience in Rostro. So
There was a lot of focus on doing. I was teaching English at the small school on top of Cerro de los Cabras. I was teaching English at Nuevo Mundo, and I was also just trying to figure out ways to connect Cerro de los Cabras to the parish and try and build some sense of community there.
When the first group came, first night, I remember, the students said, what are we going to do, Padre? What are we going to do? And I responded, well, you're not going to do. You're going to be here. And they sort of looked back and said, what do you mean we're going to be here? And I said, well, that's pretty much what I mean. You're going to be here.
I think Rostro is a program that says you're going to be sitting with people at their tables and learning from them, and does exactly that. You're putting yourself in a vulnerable position to learn what they want to learn, but in that vulnerability, there's a lot of growth. And I think that is a barrier that doing for can't really get across, because it's always, I'm doing this for you, as opposed to being with it's, we're being together. We're learning from one another and each other's reality.
In this program, we're not expected to create anything. We're not expected to do everything. We're expected to be there. And in that sense, that plays out to our ministry of here in Monte Sinaí, where we're just being. The example of Carolina, I was just there. I was awkwardly just sitting there for a while being, just watching my surroundings, getting to know people little by little.
Los chicos son tan importantes para mí, como Dios le da esa oportunidad tan grande de venir y convivir con las personas como nosotros, esas experiencias, esos momentos de difíciles, de alegría, de llanto, pero ahí estuvimos, ahí estaban, como quien dice, dándonos fuerza.
You know, sometimes you catch somebody on a wonderful day and you're invited to share in that celebration of them. Sometimes you catch somebody during a really difficult time and are also invited to sort of mourn with them or to accompany them in that. It can be sort of difficult.
It was so difficult just to sit and just listen and experience that pain with them times. I remember a neighbor telling me that she got beat by a husband for Christmas, and that's how she spent her Christmas. And just being, I don't know, so heartbroken by it, and feeling like I should be able to do something, like tell her to leave that situation, or like she could be treated better, you know, her family could be treated better than that. But like, who am I to tell her to move on? It's so easy to feel like you could tell people how to change the way they live, but it's hard to sit there and just listen and experience it and hold that weight with them.
Eso tiene un valor ante Dios grande, porque no es que den dinero o cosas, sino las charlas, las conversas, son muy importantes. Entonces uno se saca mucho provecho de lo que ha escuchado, aprendido de la persona. Un principio que esa persona lo ha escuchado.
God was always inviting us out, like, get to know this person today. Go to this person's house. And I'll meet you there, like, I'll meet you there in that conversation. I'll meet you there. The exterior community is really the space where it happens, Like I said, it's like the divine is dripping. It's just like, you walk out into the street and the dust and the sounds and the everything, and that's really where the magic happens, as it were.
Coming here, you have those unannounced visits where I knock on someone's door and I don't know what's happening behind those walls, but they let me in regardless of what they're feeling or what they're doing. Sometimes it is cooking with neighbors, sometimes it is helping them with a project in their home, or playing games, or playing with their kids while they do something else outside.
I think about all the times we were out in the street walking around and someone would pull us in off the street and make us sit down and eat. They would ask us if we were hungry, and I'd always be like, no, I've already eaten, even though I hadn't eaten. And then they would feed us like a full meal full of love and probably more than they could afford.
que eso es como ya costumbre, ya es costumbre que venga así un extranjero, hay que recibirlo con mucho gusto, porque imagínate que viene de tan lejos a visitarnos, nosotros que somos pobres. Entonces, con mucho gusto abrirle los brazos y nuestra casa, porque el apoyo es para eso. Eso yo valoro mucho esa amistad.
But it was such a gift to be welcomed like that. You know, I think, I don't know, it can't just be Ecuadorians who are like that. But holy cow, they know how to welcome a stranger and to enjoy themselves and to be authentic.
Being received so humbly and so lovingly into others' homes is something that we've tried to kind of like adopt in our own mannerisms here within our community. We've been challenged to go beyond that level of like, I had a hard day and I want to be alone, and kind of switch that to, okay, like people are always so hospitable to me, I need to offer that.
The intentional community of the volunteers living together in their house, every volunteer will tell you at the end of a year or some years later, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done and one of the most incredibly wonderful things I've ever done.
We had great prayer experiences when we prayed together. We always had dinner together. And we always talked about our days together. You know, whatever differences we had, maybe they come up at dinner, but we sat down together at the end of the day.
And so it was the experience living in community in Ecuador that made me realize, aha, this is what it is. This is what I want out of friendships and out of the relationships of my life, of a commitment to spirituality together, to loving and trusting in one another, and to communicating well. And I think one of the most tangible ways that comes through is in the ability to deal with conflict in relationships, because we had a lot of conflict, often about whose job it was to wash out the oatmeal bowl. So it's things like that, learning how to communicate and bring up difficult topics and still love each other.
Even in the times when I was the most frustrated or feeling at my worst in Ecuador, still being reminded by my community where and how to see Christ in them and in others in our Ecuadorian community. I think that's still for me the biggest challenge, but also the biggest blessing.
Bueno, eso es algo bíblico, ¿no? Porque el rostro de Cristo quiere decir que es la imagen de Cristo. Porque Cristo cuando vino a este mundo vino por los pecadores, dice, ¿no? Por los necesitados, realmente por la gente que realmente necesita tanto espiritualmente como materialmente también, principalmente espiritualmente, ¿no?
The search for the face of Christ, the recognition of the face of Christ, the insight that this is the face of Christ that one is seeing, it's the multi-dimensionality of that. It is in the people that you are traveling with. It is in the volunteers that are guiding you through this experience. It's in the children that you are meeting, the men and women who are inviting you into their homes to sit in a circle and hear about their lives.
In every aspect of it, the issue is this experience, which is faith-defined and faith-infused, of recognizing the presence of Christ. In others, in ourselves, in our world, where the face of Christ can be a source of comfort, consolation, and strength, can be all kinds of different things.
The only way to find the Rostro de Cristo is doing what you are doing. I mean, getting out of your securities, getting out of your own comfort, without all todas esas armaduras. Go to the people. To see close to the people the struggling of the people, and to suffer the same struggles.
The beauty of the people, the beauty of the experience, but some of the brutal realities. The beauty is here amidst much suffering and much deprivation. So the mystery of that's where the stretching spiritually of these young Christians, these young believers, their immersion into the gospel is what is happening as they are immersing themselves into the Ecuadorian culture as they are experiencing it in Arbolito, in, AJS, in Monte Sinai.
Within the first 3 weeks, Sister Annie brought us to Damien House, and that was in the very early days, and it wasn't even Damien House, it was just the place where Annie worked. And started playing music and asked us to dance with the women. It was just Tom and I, and we started dancing with people with leprosy, and there was a part of me that was extraordinarily repulsed, scared, and terrified by that whole experience. But that practical experience of leaning into that discomfort, and I think that we have to do that in order to see the face of Christ, especially with those who challenge us, helped me to see that the face of Christ can be found not only in those beautiful sunshine moments, but even in those dark and troubling and challenging times, and those times of great anxiety and nervousness as well.
Because it's so easy to have, a good time with the kids and laugh and dance and make friends and stuff. The hard part about it is the seeing of the face of Christ when, things are not as rosy. That's love. That's the hard part.
What we want is to be immersed in the life. And the only way to do that is accompanying and let them to accompany ourselves around and through all the instants and the different aspects of their lives.
Entonces, ¿qué más lugar específico para que ustedes vengan aquí, que aprendan? Si ustedes tenían una vida desordenada allá en los Estados Unidos, ustedes vienen aquí a aprender, a valorar muchas cosas, a valorar la familia, a valorarse ustedes mismos, a valorar el trabajo y aprendan a valorar la vida.
Rostro de Cristo calls people into a relationship with God, with others, but of course, essentially, that's relationship with self, how I see myself, how I understand myself.
I think about my Ecuadorian neighbors every day. I miss them a lot. I mean, it affects everything. I mean, that's my time in especially the work that I did with at-risk youth in Guayaquil. It brought me a lot more compassion and patience. It softens any predispositions that I had of people before. The stories that you hear about people and the relationships that you make, you realize that human beings, when they're affected by things like structural injustices and poverty and not having enough food to put on the table, because of those things, you learn about the human spirit. You learn about the ways that human beings aren't defined by what they have, but who they are.
What we're about is, we take this great education, and if you look around Iran, you realize that not everybody gets it. You're getting it because you have a gift. And what you do with it is what's going to make all the difference in the world. Now I'm looking at a face that's saying to me, why do I have to worry about the people along the road? Well, you do. That's the only reason you're getting this education. The only reason we get a good education is so that we can share it.
Very often volunteers come with the mindset, for the future, this is what I'm going to do for the future. And when they come here, they kind of put everything on hold. And that's a wonderful thing because they let God take over. And when you let God take over, the experience that you are present within helps shape you for your future.
They walk away with the responsibility to do something about it. They become players. They must become players. The antithesis of a Rostro volunteer would be complacency. If anybody finishes this year and decides they're going to go sit on their butt, we've failed and they've failed. That can't happen.
This has somehow deeply bound us to something more, whether that's a responsibility to serve others, whether that's a responsibility to recognize what we're able to offer others and what we're not able to offer others. For me, though, I think that the way the Ecuadorians here have kind of like made their way into my heart and are not leaving. And that's something that I want. I want them to stay. I have sort of changed my vocation, if you will, to wanting to minister specifically to that population in the United States.
We all had this community discussion, and it was me and all my community mates, and I was pretty set in my ways, not wanting to be teaching. They all said, you know, Lauren, we think that you should teach at Nuevo Mundo. And I was like, yeah, I think I probably should too. And I have taught ever since. So yeah, I guess Ecuador did pretty much transform my professional goals. I never in a million years thought I would want to be a teacher or enjoy teaching as much as I have.
Something that I desire more now than I did ever before going to Ecuador is the desire to enter into genuine relationships with the people who I walk with, whether it's my family, my friends, my students, my colleagues, and to experience true compassion is to suffer with. And in Ecuador, it was the first time that I felt in some ways forced to do that. And whether I was suffering with the struggles of my community mates, whether I was suffering with the struggles of our neighbors, it was the first time that I felt there was no escape from that reality. And bringing that home was an awakening for me after spending that year in Ecuador.
One leaves this experience with a heart transformed, with an openness to and an understanding of recognition of the Spirit of Jesus alive in the world and in each one of us, and the empowerment that that brings to be people that they understand their own life as being one that contributes to the transformation of this world in the way that God is calling the world to be transformed.
It's hard to, wow, it's hard to put words on, you know, even 20 years later. They taught me a lot about, I guess, the generosity of the human spirit and how unnecessary and artificial most of the walls are that we put up. I think the willingness of our friends and neighbors and colleagues to open themselves up to me was really humbling and instructive. It was also a whole lot of fun. It was really, really fun. The joy part of it, you know, the finding of joy in the most unlikely places.
Sorry.
Y por el número que usted me da, nosotros lo buscamos. Inmediatamente lo recuperamos.